Good morning, afternoon, evening to all of those who are joining live wherever you are. I think this is our first webinar, and we are hoping we will conduct a series of these going forward. So it's worth spending a few seconds in talking about why are we actually doing the webinar or the series of webinars, I suppose. Well, we are basically going through a transformational journey in the healthcare world, and that would be an understatement. So, what is the most important thing for all of us to do from our perspective is to continue to collaborate and learn as to how key leaders, key initiatives are really using Gen AI to transform healthcare. What's working for them, what's not working for them, so on and so forth. So that's why we actually want to start, this entire journey. And what we want to focus on is to really try and invite key leaders, people who are, in a way, in the middle of actually doing the transformations. So we can actually learn from all of them as to what is working, what's not working. So the overall intent of this webinar is for us to rejiggle the student in us, to learn as much as we can, and obviously use that knowledge to do something better for healthcare. That is the overall intent of these webinars. So when we thought of starting, and we thought that who would be the first panelist who could actually sort of join us, the two names came very naturally up front. And both of them happen to be very close friends of mine. We have been working together, socializing together for good last 15 plus years. In their own rights, they are brilliant minds of both technology and healthcare. And most importantly, they have been in the middle of very large scale transformations, although in two dramatically different spaces. Karthik Rajan, who I know for last 15 plus years from my Salesforce days, has been a key driver of technology related innovations in the healthcare space. And Evan Grossman, who has primarily been sort of my advisor, actually understanding healthcare and technology and how together are actually making an impact. So I'm super excited to actually welcome all of you, first of all, and both of them to kick off our webinar series. My sincere hope is through this series, we will learn a ton about how Gen AI is transforming healthcare, what's working, what's not working, and how should we actually go about doing this. So with that, I would love to introduce Evan Grossman, CEO of Affineon, sort of health, as well as Karthik Rajan, who is a stealth, startup CEO of a company that he's actually working on, and a close friend of mine, as well as both of them are actually advisors of XCaliber. So I'm going to request both of them to introduce themselves, especially their journey through large scale transformations, which both of them were actually not just privy to, but be actually part of it. So I'll start with Evan. Evan, you were at Athena Health when Athena Health literally went bonkers from a early stage startup to this a dominant cloud native EHR. You were actually part of that entire process. Would love to hear your background and how was your journey at Athena. Over to you.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I joined Athena. I think I was around the 800th employee. We had just under 2,000 doctors using the electronic health record. By the time I left 10 years later, we had over 60,000 clinicians live. Now they have over 150,000 live on the electronic health record. And so we went through a number of really interesting transformations, both from a tech stack perspective, from a scaling an organization perspective, and delivering technology to change clinicians and healthcare workers' lives in general. And yeah, since leaving Athena, been involved in several startups. My current one, Affineon, which I started 2 years ago, saves primary care doctors several hours a week by triaging items that come into their inbox and reducing the amount of time they need to spend both drafting or delivering patient communications and reviewing items. So very high level. I'm sure we'll get into the fun stuff in a few minutes.
So, Evan, if I could just do a quick follow-up on part as when you joined, like from 2,000 doctors, clinicians to about 60,000, that's a 30-fold increase, right? Also, simultaneously, the EHRs were becoming kind of the default standard for healthcare during that same phase. Any sort of any recollections from you saying, oh wow, this actually changed for good, this probably not so much, both in the provider, patient, on the payer side of things? Anything in that journey that kind of still in the back of your mind to say, oh, that's what happened?
I mean, I think it always the challenge in healthcare, which is one of the most decentralized industries in the world, right? Maybe
Yeah.
construction and education are more decentralized, and which has these very powerful frontline workers, right? At Ford Motor Company, rarely the people who are sort of the assembly line workers have any say in the thing, whereas doctors who are the frontline workers in healthcare have a huge influence
Right.
and can veto a lot of decisions. So I think the challenge always as a health technology provider is when do you allow variation and support variation and when do you not? And so, early on, one of the first, you know, challenges we had at Athena was the government was making us capture for all patients whether or not they were smokers or had ever been a smoker. And the question was, do we force a central way to store it, a central way to codify it, and insist that all doctors do it the same way, or do we let them just put in their notes like former smoker? In which case, without Gen AI at the time, it would have been very hard to report on and to document. And so that was an example of where we said, nope, we're not going to allow variation. We're going to standardize. Whereas there were many, many other places where we said, yep, we're going to allow variation. And I think always the challenge is when do you let doctors do whatever they want? When do you come back to know it has to be codified or classified in some way? And to some extent, that's what Gen AI is awesome at, right? It can do a great job of extraction and classification. So to some extent, you don't have to rely on discrete data capture and storage to get the same benefits, which we fought, many battles with doctors, with other internal users on when we were going to force certain capture and not force certain things. So, but yeah, I'd say that was probably just managing variation among clinicians is, I think, always one of the really interesting challenges in healthcare technology.
Yep, that's a great insight, and thank you, Evan, for first of all being here and then actually, just kicking off with a great introduction. Thank you. So let's just move over to Karthik, and he comes from a lot, very different background in a way, from Oracle, from Salesforce, from Google. Obviously, he had a successful, bootstrapped a scribe automation company called, Suki as well. So, but he's a primary technologist, and I'm going to request him to give his background primarily from a technology perspective, especially where he was at Salesforce and he saw a massive, growth of the company and software, software as a service paradigm, right from beginning of 2000. So, over to you, Karthik.
Thank you, Prakash. Glad to be here. Right. I think Salesforce was probably the best learning experience in my career, right? Like we had a front row seat to see essentially the app, which was a niche CRM application, basically evolve into this massive multi-cloud enterprise software layer powered by the platform, right? Like you really saw the true power of a platform at Salesforce. I was fortunate enough to be there during the launch of various clouds, including the collaboration cloud, health, and everything else. I used to lead infrastructure engineering at Salesforce, right? So I had like a front row seat to see the growth of the company across all these spectrums. We were doing like 10 million transactions a day when I joined the company. By the time we left, we were over like 4 billion, right? Phenomenal learning experience.
Yes.
I then switched to healthcare in 2016, right? Like I was doing big data services at Oracle, and you quickly realize that healthcare has a bad data problem, not necessarily a big data problem. And so you start doing the five whys to understand the problem, and one thing led to another. And I started my first company. I was very early onto voice. So I tried to build Alexa for seniors with a care coordination platform in the back end. And then quickly pivoted to basically like Alexa for doctors, right? Like the company that's now known as Suki. So that was a very fun journey. Took Suki through multiple rounds of funding and product market fit across the core assistant and an evolutionary platform. I left at the end of 2019 to focus on mental health, like create a mental health company before COVID hit, right? Um, I then joined Google Research to focus on their healthcare efforts in the clinical space. And I spent 3+ years there building everything from a data platform and integration layer to a wonderful tool called Care Studio to help clinicians get the insights from these clinical records and trying to push the boundaries in terms of what AI can do for clinical care delivery, right? We worked on some of the core foundational search and summarization technologies that you see now in the Google Cloud. Early work on a lot of these predictions, early work on medical LLMs and their use to extract knowledge and insights from medical records. So that's been a fun journey to see. I'm now in the process of kicking off a company focused on building enterprise applications using the latest and greatest in Gen AI.
Fantastic. Thank you, Karthik. I think you have a fascinating background, and we had so many of those conversations over the last 10, 15 years. So I'm going to stay with you for a second, and then we'll go back to Evan on the same topic. But in spite of these spectacular sort of kind of successes as you said, right, that you had the front row seat to all of these, I'm sure there are things that actually worked, or things that did not work that you thought would actually work. Or what are some of the key lessons from these things, especially given that we are going through another cycle of a massive transformation right now? So it would be very interesting to sort of learn, from those experiences. So could you just elaborate, especially, and I'm going to be even more, specific to Evan to say what did not work. Obviously, a lot of things worked, but what did not work? Why did not work? What were some of the key learnings, and how you guys actually evolved, and how we can learn from all of those as we are driving this transformation?
So I think I'll kick off like one key lesson, and I think everybody in the healthcare will resonate with this, right? It is not enough to just have the capability. If you have like the capability to do something, does not guarantee adoption, right? And the key to success in any healthcare endeavor is to basically figure out the last mile integration, right? And getting whatever tool you have into the workflow of your user, be it the clinician or the patient or the insurers, if you will, right? So the last mile integration is probably the key thing, right? Like, and we saw that at Zuki where we had our feet on the ground and humility to kind of go understand the workflows of clinicians, their key pain points, and evolve the product as we kind of like learned from it, right? I think that kind of an incremental, iterative, fast approach is probably the key to success anywhere, right? Um, you see a lot of papers right now and big announcements right now that talk about how this prediction model is better and you can predict the risk of sepsis by X and this and that, right? I had this very funny saying that like prediction without actions is just like a nuisance. So it's not enough to just give the right prediction. It's important to kind of make that actionable and integrate into the workflow, right? And I think that was the key learning both from Suki and from Google, which is like, how do you solve a problem that people really are struggling with? And how do you give them the easy button, if you will, to basically take actions on whatever insights you provide?
Right. Absolutely. I think that's absolutely fascinating. I'm going to take the clue from there and sort of go to Evan. So, Evan, and by the way, folks on the call, when I joined Athena 2015, Evan and me used to debate, mildly put, on a lot of topics. And one of the key was that Evan kept on telling me this, that look, you can solve technical problem. That's very different from solving healthcare problems. Sometimes technical problems are easy to solve. Not to say that they are always easy to solve, but they are easy to solve or easier to solve as compared to solving the real world healthcare problems. So I think I'm going to pull in Evan here to talk about key learnings he had through his healthcare journey to say what didn't work, what worked, what are the key lessons that you learn that we all should sort of internalize as we actually look in the future.
Yeah, so and a lot of it is around change management. I really want to second what Karthik said about prediction without action is nuisance. I think they're also very different skill sets, right? Being able to see a train wreck about to occur doesn't mean you're able to prevent it, right? The
Right.
number one cause of 30-day readmissions is homelessness, right? You
Right.
can very often predict patients that are likely to return in 30 days, which is something that people have spent years building these algorithmic models to reduce 30-day readmission. But knowing who's likely to be readmitted and being able to stop them, completely different skill sets, different challenges. And knowing which ones you then should take action on and can take action on, and which ones like, okay, we may not be able to do anything here. Very, very critical. So what so I think always not factoring in change management and sort of last mile in terms of what is a clinician actually going to do. I think that the most common issue I've seen across all technology is people assume that the reason people aren't doing the right thing is because they don't know the right thing to do. And that's almost never the case, right? There are way too many, obese cardiologists and divorced marriage therapists who completely know the right thing to do, but actually doing it is hard. And so the way you drive that change and the way you force people down the right path is really challenging, right? There's a lot I've done to study behavior and change management to figure out not just, oh, let's just tell this patient to take the drug, right? Tell the patient, oh, make sure you set up an appointment with your doctor and bring the drugs, to instead, here's a bag. Don't tell them to put all their pills. Tell them to put all the pill bottles into it because you don't want them to empty out the pills, as some patients have done, right? And sort of you have to make it easy for people to do the right thing as they're going on that journey. Um, I think the other thing, lately what hasn't worked is one of the beautiful and confounding things about LLMs is they're not predictable. And doctors at their core are scientists, right? They really don't like when things are different each time. And so we've had to spend a lot of time thinking through, when do we use LLMs in the background, because we're using them less and less in the foreground, right, to extract, to classify, to do other things. And how do we give doctors a predictable, repeatable solution that they can trust? Because they get very like we were, early on in our company journey, we were using LM to draft beautiful notes to patients, and everyone said, "Yep." Or answers to patients. These are great. They're right. We love them. It takes us longer to read them and review them than if we had just written them ourselves. So stop doing it, please. Right. And so, we had to understand that the job to be done was to actually, reduce the amount of time clinicians spent. And these, what makes the LLM drafted notes so beautiful is they're a little different each time, they're a little nuanced. That was not what the clinicians wanted, and that would not save them time. So understanding, you know,
Right.
when when to sort of be deterministic, and I call putting the LLM in the background versus the foreground, so that you can still get, and LMs are great at a lot of other tasks. They're great at writing if you want different prose each time. Turns out that's not what doctors want. Patients may want it, doctors not at all. So that's probably one of the recent examples I think about.
Yeah, I think right on cue, Evan. So, somebody said this great line. I don't know who it is, so I'm going to reuse it. That in software world, we think about, testing the software by using, a small set of things called edge cases or corner cases, negative conditions, and
Mhm.
so those kinds of things. Healthcare, they said, every patient is an edge case because every human body is slightly different, and that complex
Mhm.
mechanism is actually presents a challenge to you. So one of the biggest challenges, and you mentioned it, is really as technologists, as product builders in this space, to really focus on one specific area. What problems should we solve? What problems we should not solve? And what problems we should actually collaborate with? And I'm going to emphasize the collaboration part because the space is massive. The challenges are extremely complicated. So collaboration is actually key. So I'm going to start with you, Evan. If you put sort of your product management hat in a way to say, okay, here are the set of problems that I think we should solve, or here are a set of problems that we should probably not solve, or anything along those lines, because the space is so vast and there are so many things you could do, and you could easily get lost in trying to solve problems that are probably irrelevant or may not ever actually have a solutions. Any thoughts on that one? And then we'll go over to Karthik with the same question.
Yeah, I mean, the I love the question. I think the first thing I'm always thinking about is, is it a problem that people are going to pay you to solve?
Right.
Right. So,
Spot
and that
on.
people
Yep.
want solved, right? So I
Hmm.
think, you know, too many people who aren't in healthcare assume that most of what doctors want is to be better doctors and for computers to give them more clinical advice on, because they've all seen, the episodes of Grey's Anatomy, like where there's this one really interesting edge case that the doctor didn't think of, and therefore the patient died, or right. And so they all think of, oh, how, and that's actually, I've met very few doctors that actually think the computer is going to help them very right. What they want the computer to do is take away all the scut work and the things they didn't get into a doctor to be, right?
Right.
And they want a computer to get out of their way and let them really, engage with their patients and or their staff, right? To really, so they want the computer to help them be better doctors by taking stuff off their plate, not giving them more differential diagnoses to consider. Um, and so often when the thing I always advise healthcare entrepreneurs to think about is someone actually willing to pay you to solve the problem? And doctors are willing to pay me to save them 3 hours a week, going through their inbox, because that's, they get more time with the family, they can see more patients, it's valuable. So that's the first thing. Then the second question I always ask is, can I do it better than anyone else? And that gets to the collaboration point, because very often, you know, yeah, especially when you have a good engineering team, there's no shortage of problems you can solve. But if someone else has solved them, or someone else, you can accelerate your unique differentiator by just, buying instead of building. So, I think, over time, entrepreneurs who have bought instead of built and, focused on what really makes them unique have been rewarded. And so I always try, like, it's why we didn't get into our integration and used XCaliber for that, right? I mean, there's any number of areas where we just would much rather outsource it because other people have done hard, complex work. And we're going to focus our limited resources on the thing that's really going to make a difference.
That's great. Actually, the insights on really solving the problems that really matter to people. And the money part is really interesting to me because that's where you can actually apply a litmus test to say, is something that I'm building is really useful or not? Because if somebody is ready to pay some money for it, that must be really that useful to them. And that makes a difference to healthcare overall. So, but let's just go over to Karthik. And Karthik, same question to you as to say, from a technology lens, what would you recommend as to what sort of problems that we should try and solve, we should not solve, or what we just collaborate with? Any insights on that part?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to add one more thing. Anybody who's trying to build in healthcare, I really urge you to kind of look at the triple aim or the quadruple aim now, right? It's a very good grounding framework to figure out whether the thing that you want to solve and the product that you want to build is actually grounded in kind of impacting healthcare, right? Like all of us have this noble goal of impacting health care and making access better, but grounding it in a framework like the triple aim or the quadruple aim goes a long way, right? Generally with that comes the compensation and the payment part of it too. As far as the tech stack is concerned, I don't know where I heard this, but I've used this throughout my career, right? Like there are two kinds of companies: companies that have a great architecture and companies that are still in business, right? So, an early stage entrepreneur, like your goal, the feedback I had for my team in my starter note was assemble, don't build, right? You have to really narrow down, okay, this is the problem you're solving, and this is our core competency, right? This is you need to own the workflow, right? You need to own the learning process. You need to in the world of AI, the AI safeguards and safety, and you need to focus on security, right? The rest of the stuff you can generally like assemble using phenomenal off-the-shelf platform services and open source libraries and whatnot, right? As entrepreneurs, we want to kind of build for where the puck is going, like 1 to 2 years down the line, right? Not necessarily where the puck is now. And you're seeing this massive change of rate of improvement on all software, right? Everything from the LLMs that are coming out to software platforms that are making it a lot more easier to develop, right? So utilize that to rapidly prototype and build your applications. Focus on the end problem, focus on the workflow, focus on what your moat is and what your differentiation is. And I would say build a partner or buy the rest of the stack, right? And really focus on the end user and in the world of AI safety. Those are the two main areas, right? The second thing I would say is as you kind of figure out product market fit and you start to scale, really invest in your data platform, right? Take a platform centric approach in kind of building your startup because that gives you optionality as you kind of like get more use cases to kind of rapidly pivot or expand or go from one to n. Many companies that I've seen tend to underinvest in the platform side, right? That kind of like locks them in, right? Like a platform and your infrastructure needs to be differentiated for you to kind of like go in the direction that you need to as a company. And people tend to underinvest in that. So that's the second area that I would say focus on once you validated your thesis with product market fit.
So I'm going to do something, interesting now. So I'm going to put both of you on a little bit of a spot and say, you guys observe this industry, very, very keenly, all the time. So would you actually be open, Karthik, to point out a effort, a company, a product, any initiative you can think about that has actually made a real difference and you have been like wowed by it to an extent to say, wow, I never really thought that this could actually sort of work and could have such a big an impact. Similarly, something on the opposite side of things, that something that was so obvious that it actually should work and could work and but didn't work. I mean, any quick, sort of pointers that you can say, because inspirations are very, very important for sort of builders in general to say, hey, what worked, what didn't work, and how they thought about it, how versus how I'm basically going to think about it.
Yeah. Prakash, my answers are going to be a little bit biased here because, again, had a front row seat to see how this thing goes, right?
Of
Um,
course.
when we started Suki, this was right before LLMs, right? But you already had like the key papers behind that. And you saw the generational technology kind of come in, and our first versions of our natural language understanding systems were really good and getting better using the training loops, if you will, right? And you had an inclination saying that ambient computing and having like an assistive interface is going to take off, right? I have been just blown away by the rapid rate of change and improvement that these systems have now brought in to a point where building a virtual scribe is a couple of months worth of effort using some of the latest and greatest LLMs now, right?
Yeah.
And these things have kind of become commoditized now and they've become features. that every single EHR either has or has in the pipeline and will be releasing very soon, right? And not just describes, but trying to use AI and summarization techniques to process vast amounts of information and deliver the right insight to the doctors about the right patient, right? Like every EHR is now kind of like has that in some way, shape, or form. So I've been really blown away by the speed with which these things have kind of like come to fore and rapidly adopted by clinicians. In terms of where things I don't think have gone really that well, I would kind of like go back to all these like prediction models that we've seen, right? Like whether it's like sepsis or 30-day readmissions and so on and so forth. You've seen a lot of phenomenal papers and studies talking about how they have like the best world-class models that predicted like X% better or talk about the AUROC improvements and stuff of that sort. But none of them have actually borne fruit because they've become nuisance to clinicians, right? Like they contribute more to alert fatigue, and people have really not focused on the easy button, right? So I would kind of like keep coming back to these algorithms that are done with the best of intent, but have not been productized as a key area.
Yep. No, I think that's spot on. And I think it goes well with what Evan actually said a few minutes ago, which is we really need to solve the problem that people in the healthcare world wants us to solve, not what we want to solve because they are interesting problems. So I'm going to twist this question a little bit for Evan. And so, Evan, we are in the healthcare platform business, as you know, and you are one of the users of our platform. But generally, when I say healthcare platform, I get people look at me, they pause, and generally there is sympathy involved in that pause or a reaction to what we're trying to build. But I want to basically ask you this question: that healthcare has generally stayed away from platform centric approaches. Now you are actually a consumer of variety of different platforms, not just ours, but you're using variety of different platforms. You are that modern builder who's actually building a very sophisticated app, and you have grown really, really well in last 12 to 18 months. What's your view on platform now, right? We started talking about platform at Athena 10 years ago, and now platform themselves are evolved. So anything that comes to your mind from a platform perspective that is really helping you and perhaps could actually help you even more? Same question, but more in the context of a platform.
I mean, to be honest, I don't really think about platforms. I like what Karthik said about it, assemble, not build, right? I think to the extent a platform helps me assemble and I have multiple platforms as I'm assembling, great. Um, I think I'm very sensitive to the cost of everything being a one-off. And
Right.
so if it's clear that every time I need something, I have to go back to my platform provider and pay for another service, or I need to ask them to do more work or whatever, then it's not really a useful platform, right? The things that have been really good, in working with XCaliber and some other partners is all the that they're where my puck is, like, oh, now I need this, oh, they already have that, oh, now I need, right, some of the stuff that as our product has evolved and needed more capabilities, like some ability to do OCR and read faxes and other things that we didn't do when we started out, but now it's built into our, so we can very easily take advantage of those platform capabilities as we grow. So those are the things. I was I was yeah.
Anything, Evan, that has not worked for you in the sense like something that you thought could actually sort of work, be in the platform space or otherwise, that has been a bit of a surprise to say, hey, I thought that this would actually make a big impact and work and hasn't worked. There have been plenty of those examples in the healthcare and health AI space. I'm just curious.
I mean, the one thing that, but it's pretty niche is, we started using this prompt flow tool, which is an open source thing from Microsoft, because early on we thought the challenge was how we were going to chain different LLM prompts together, and we invested a lot in the tool, and it turned out not to help in the ways we had hoped. And while we're still using it, it sort of adds a bit of drag.
Okay.
Which did the thing, yeah. I mean, the thing I think we didn't invest enough in early that I wish we had was more testing suite. I think that it's very easy when you're building software, not easy, but it's very necessary to build automated testing and unit testing and everything else. It's much harder to do that in an LLM world, but there are
Right.
ways to do it. And I think that the real challenge, especially when you're dealing with the randomness of LLMs, is making sure you have good ways to understand, is
Right.
the model drifting, are your results changing, and the amount you actually need to invest in test sets and harnesses and scenarios and ground truth to actually validate that you're continuing to get the results you want, or when you make a prompt change, you're actually getting an improvement, is, the earlier you invest in that, the better your results in an LLM world. Let me leave it at that.
Right.
Well said.
No,
And if I may add one thing, Prakash,
sure.
I think the verifiability is key in working in this AI space, right? The more you invest
Yes.
in the verifiability aspects and the automated tests and everything else, the faster your learning loop is. The second
Mm-hmm.
thing I would also call out is data liquidity. I think we
Right.
underestimate how important quality data is for both our AI applications and even for simple workflows that are more like deterministic, right? So having that will be also key. Like invest in the data and invest in the verification layer at the very top.
Yep, I think that the great thing. So I think we are coming close to the end. So I have many more questions, but I'm sure that for the future. But I'm going to end with one, sort of prediction from both of you. If you put on your sort of the kind of oracle hats and say, look in the future, 3 to 5 years, give me one or two prediction from a healthcare industry. Looks like every aspect of healthcare actually is being challenged and transformed and disrupted because of the infusion of sort of a lot of AI centric technologies. What do you expect to see really changing in next 3 to 5 years? And once we get your predictions, then we will go to Jessica to get some, audience questions. So please, Karthik, uh, what's your prediction for next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, how much time do we have? So I would just quickly kind of summarize it on the three fronts, right? From a uh, consumer perspective, I think we're basically looking at a doctor in your pocket on your phone, right? That's going to
Mhm.
give you a differential diagnosis 70 to 80% of the time, backstopped by a wonderful team of clinicians who know exactly what you're kind of like going through. And you're not going to become a new patient anymore, right? Like every patient is a known patient for any clinician who's going to see you, whether they're seeing you for the first time or for the nth time, right?
Right.
Uh, some of the recent efforts by the administration to kind of like create those records have really pushed that boundary. So
Right.
I'm really looking forward to see how that evolves. From a clinician's perspective, I think we will finally start to see joy back in medicine, where a lot of the administrative workload will get taken away by or will be automated by AI, and clinicians can actually really focus on delivering at the top of their license, right? And from an insurance perspective, I am really hopeful for the evolution and the prevalence of value-based care, right? Like the promise of where care should be and looking at people's holistic health rather than episodic payments and care. So uh, I think we are much closer than we could ever be if all these things align.
Wonderful. Fantastic. And I'm going to go over to Evan and ask for his predictions as to where does he
I,
see
I'm
things.
I'm way too cynical. I hope Karthik is right. That would be awesome. I would love to live
But
in
that's
that future,
exactly why you're here, Evan, to provide the other side.
and certainly there are pockets that will do that in 3 to 5 years. But we're still talking about an industry that 20, 40 years after the invention of email and electronic communication is still using fax, right? And still using tens of millions. Every healthcare conference I go to, there's new vendors with better ways to send faxes. And so I think healthcare is very resilient to technical improvements and change in a lot of areas. So it will be interesting to see. I certainly expect that, there'll be huge pressure in areas like radiology where, um, you know, the question isn't, can a AI read an X-ray as well as a radiologist, but it's how many things do radiologists miss on a regular basis that the AIs are now picking up, right? And so I think there will be a number of advanced diagnostic areas where I think there'll be some pretty good milestones, and hopefully in the right way, where people are getting early intervention, early stage detection that they weren't before. So I think that's huge. But you also have just massive entrenched lobby is the wrong word, but people that own hospital beds is probably the right way to put it, who have a vested interest in things not changing as well as they can. And then you have a bunch of entrepreneurs like us who are trying to, make them less and less relevant in a smaller and smaller part of the spending pie. And we'll see how that battle goes in 5 years. I think it'll still be raging pretty fiercely.
Yeah, I do think that that on the administrative and operational front, I do hope that partially you're wrong, Evan. We will actually see a
Mm-hmm.
significant, sort of, uptick in terms of adoption of these technologies,
Mm-hmm.
and actually, more importantly, having a real impact. When it comes to real patient health and some of those things, I'm very curious, and I'm little cynical as you are to see how much change we expect in 5 years. Maybe it's a longer journey, I don't know. But I think on the administrative front and on the operational front, I do expect that we will actually see a significant change. And hopefully that's good for everybody. So I think this has been a fascinating conversation for a good 40 plus minutes. So I'm going to give Jessica, one or two questions that you may have gotten from audience so that we can wrap up on time.
Yeah, I'll keep it to two. And the first really, I think, connects back to what Evan was saying, the urgency to innovate in healthcare met with compliance concerns, safety concerns. How are companies supposed to find that balance between that very California ethos of move fast and break things and do no harm? So how do they balance innovation and urgency?
I mean, we have a team of nurses that for some of that, right? So I mean, I think, it's humans in the loop for some things. It's, I think you always have to get a product used and used by people quickly. But in healthcare where, LMs are pretty good 98, 99% of the time. No doctor will tell you what 1 to 2% of the patients, they don't mind if you treat poorly. And so you do need to figure out early on how you're going to get to the 100% reliability you need to be, and whether that's humans in the loop, whether that's deterministic. There's any number of ways to do it. But yeah, we built early on so we could move quickly a set of humans in the loop so we could roll out new features without ensuring they were at 100% by having early on staff QA and confirm that.
Thank
I
you.
mean, I would just add a +1 to what Evan said, right? It's not about building a better doctor, it's making the doctor better by providing them the right information to care for the patient. So it's augmented, augmenting them with intelligence would be the way to kind of like look at it. And take a very human-centered, user-centric approach in terms of how you build the human in the loop workflow, right? And
Yep.
provide them the information that they need to basically verify and subsequently trust the output from your AI.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Jessica?
And that actually covered the other question that had come in was about clinician in the loop, human in the loop. I think you sort of answered that question for the group. So I think this has been a wonderful conversation. Prakash, I'll let you wrap it up.
Yep, absolutely. So first of all, thank you, both of you, for taking some time and coming and kicking off our webinar series. I think this was, I mean, I had the privilege of having these conversations with you for the last 10, 15 years. So for me, this is just ongoing process, as far as I'm concerned. But I'm glad that you're actually able to share this with, a bunch of other people. We will actually continue to take our webinar journey forward. And we intentionally kept the first one at a very broad level to sort of set the context for sort of next set of things that are coming in. And what we intend to do is to go fairly deep in specific areas of sort of data quality and human in the loop in the AI and different technologies and so on and so forth, and hopefully make that very, very specific. And I'm hoping, guys, that in few months you might be actually interested to come back and talk about a specific topic. And with that, we will wrap it up for now with the assurance that we will be back soon with another interesting topic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.